Welcome again, wrestling fans. Welcome to the MatStats Show, a show that talks about wrestling statistics and how we're doing things just a little bit differently with them. It's part of the NWCA's State of Wrestling, along with Kevin Hazard and Glenn Gormley. I'm Jason Bryant. Glenn's going to bring us the stats. Kevin's going to bring us a different perspective, and I'm just going to ask the questions. Today, we're talking about wrestling statistics in a manner that's also been one of the most divisive points when it comes to talking about this sport, Glenn and Kevin, and it's dual meet scoring. We're talking specifically about college wrestling here, although this does translate over to the high school ranks a bit. But in our college wrestling world, we have 6-5-4-3. That's all we've got. It's been a way we've scored wrestling over the years. Glenn's going to talk about some of the history of it when we get into it. But ultimately, Glenn, why are we looking at this in a way with statistics? How are we going to back this up? What are we going to get into on today's show?
Okay. I first want to say this show's an opinion of MatStats and not necessarily that opinion of NWCA at all. What we're doing here, there's been a lot of talk, like Jason has mentioned, about is the current system for dual meet scoring the right one. Even wrestling legend Wade Chalice has written some stuff through the past years and referenced stories way back to 1955 about we need to change these. Well, we've asked people what they want to hear about. And this was one of the biggest things I've gotten in feedback. Okay, so we listen to you and we're here. We're doing this from a statistical point of view. Okay, do we have personal opinions and stuff? Of course we do. But MatStats is looking at it differently from the 3, 4, 5, 6 that Jason mentioned. And we're doing what MatStats calls the margin of victory for dual meet scoring. Okay. When we say that, okay, currently the match 0-7 is a 3-team point, 8-14 is 4, 15 plus is 5, a pin to fall to forfeit is 6, and the unsportsmanlike conduct is -1. What we are doing here is, I'll let Kevin review a lot of this because he's our little bit of story in here because he's the oldest one by far.
By far.
Kevin,
by far.
Tell us about. Yeah.
Well,
tell us about.
It's interesting. It's gone from, if you look at it over the past century, now I'm not that old, but I do remember, some of it through the 60s and 70s. But back in the 20s, of the 1920s, matches were 10 minutes long. And if you didn't pin the guy, it went on for another three periods of 2 minutes. And then if there's no pin, the referee made a decision, and it was based mainly on riding time. And in the 30s, they started paring it down and went to 9 minutes, and then to 8 minutes, and then to 7. And then the scoring changed too. In the 20s, the fall was 3 seconds. And again, it just came down through the years. And I think back in it was in the 60s, they changed it to a 1 second fall. So it went 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. So everything has been to try and make the match a little sleeker, make it a little more comprehensive. But all through, and they did change the scoring a little bit. But at one point, there was no tech fall. It was a superior decision. And I think the first time it went in, it was like 10 points. But the match didn't stop. It was not till the technical fall came in that they said after 15, you're up by 15 points, it changed. So there's 1,000 different nuances, but those are the base changes that have been made over the years.
Yeah, and one thing I've picked up in part of my research, and I'm digging through the book in the 1963 Amateur Wrestling News, where I'm, again, part of my side project with statistics and research is looking at where our teams were. How many teams do we have back in the day? Well, upon reading those things, you're seeing suggestions like the Big 8 conference back in the day. They were talking about 1-1-1 scoring and 1-point takedowns, 1-point reversals, 1-point escapes, or 1-0-1. And then at one point they did make the recommendation in that early 60s to go from a 2 second to a 1 second. And that has been the way we've had it since then. But it's just weird that I did read over that 1 second rule change not that long ago. And that was 60 years ago. So, wrestling rules are, we joke about international wrestling changing its rules all the time. They've been pretty static for the last decade, whereas college and high school wrestling rules, they're the ones that have been, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And Glenn, a lot of it is because we want to see what? More scoring. And now we're going to dive into it. More scoring. And personally, I want to see something that's more equitable in what a team scored sporting event is. Now, wrestling, we have that caveat that it's an individual sport and it's a team sport. Well, in a dual meet, that is a team competition. 10 versus 10, although it's not, 10 intermingling with the 10. It's not like like in basketball, you've got 5-on-5 and they're all on the court at the same time. So this is something that I've been looking forward to. I've been looking to get interested in a little bit more, and it's one thing that people definitely have pretty hard and fast opinions on.
Yes, we do. And my suggestion here is, I'm not saying the system's broken right now. I'm saying let's look around and experiment. Let's learn from these stats we're about to show you and see what some possible changes. Okay. This could also down the road lead to possible changes in tournament scoring, because there's a great many people think the tournament scoring is broken. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with change occasionally. Okay. So what MatStats is offering here is a margin of victory scoring. In other words, 1-0 you win by 1, 8-7 you win by the same 1 point, etc. Okay. The largest margin of victory you could have in wrestling is 21 points. And I know people are saying, wait a minute, tech fall of 15. Well, somebody's winning 14-0. They take somebody down to their back. That's 6 points if they have it there long enough to 4 seconds. And that's 20. And then they get the riding time point for 21.
Yeah, time's got to expire. You do it with, say, 7 seconds to go. You get the throw, because one of the key parts about wrestling scoring, people mess this up all the time. A match has to go 7 minutes to get the riding time point. Match termination at 6:59, you do not get the riding time point. It's got to go 7 minutes. So it is true that 21 points is a distinct possibility of happening. It's rare, but again, we shouldn't legislate rules because of the 1 in a million. Not, it's probably less than 1 in a million, but Glenn, you'll talk about the rarity of this. But
see how rare it is down the show. And we also have to handle the 0-point victory. Okay. 2 people can be tied on the scoreboard, but somebody wins with criteria. Okay.
We don't like to use the word criterion, folk style, but we do have it. It's TB2, riding time. That is it. We don't call it that, but you don't, and that's another misconception too. A point does not go on the board at the end of the second overtime, or in this case now in college, the first overtime, because they've trimmed back the tiebreaker rules too.
Yep. So anyway, what are the positives on this margin of victory idea that MatStats offering? I think it'll be easier for the fan to understand. The casual fan, which we need more casual fans in the sport, okay, has trouble understanding the 3, 4, 5, 6 rules. Okay. In this theory, every point will count in every match. Okay. Another thing margin of victory can do, and we'll get into this later, it can produce more parity. Okay. We have more scoring by teams, which will be exciting. The possibility of a big comeback. Everyone loves that. Okay. We think that scoring last 30 seconds of a match would happen in the current system that could happen in this system. It puts a premium on scoring. In the MatStats book that I released a couple years ago, we learned that in the last 15 seconds of all 3 periods, which totals to 45 without an overtime, there's an inordinate low amount of scoring. I mean, people aren't doing as much with 15 seconds. With this change in the rule, that could change that completely. Okay. We also learned in our last show, MatStats 11, about the scoring of the NCAA tournament. The scoring has decreased 15% from the 1988 to 92 period to 2017-22, to that 5-year period. If we don't change the tournament rules, this won't affect it, but I think this could increase scoring in a dual meet and eventually in a tournament. Okay. The negatives that MatStats sees in this. In a strict margin of victory scoring, the pin would have to be worth at least 22. Okay. That would equal 22 1-point victories, or, 2 11-point victories. Winning is important for each match. So some people are going to have a hard time wrapping their hands around a pin being worth that much more. Okay. We also might see less risky throws at the end of a match because I'm losing by 5 points right now. There's no sense for me not to try to headlock the guy, and come out on top. But now if I know I got no chance to headlock the guy, I might do nothing, because of the margin of victory thing. So that could affect that. Okay. So what MatStats does, being a stats-oriented show, okay, we are digging into the stats, and we're going to dig deep into the numbers and analyze them to give wrestling coaches, fans, families better chance to understand our argument and our opinions. That's what MatStats does. We're here to help some old wrestlers, and coaches are here to help people understand this. We are the money ball of wrestling. Okay. If you go to slide 10, Jason, thank you. You can see from 1988 to 1992, the margin of victory, the number of occurrences or frequencies, whatever you want to call it, and the percentage that happens. This is a big negative correlation, especially if you control for the zero, because the zero is a rare thing. But it is almost a negative 0.9 correlation, which means as the margin of victory goes up, the amount of occurrences go down. Okay. It mimics that almost totally in the second 5-year period. And then, of course, you can see that in slide 11. Then in slide 12, since it's almost exactly the same in both of them, it's almost identical in slide 12. Okay. Where they're almost all 0.896, which is almost negative 0.9.
Now, Glenn, before we get too deep, explain where you're getting your margins of victory from. Where are these stats originating? Are you going through the dual meet individual results, or are you using the NCAA tournament results?
We use the NCAA tournament. Thank you, Jason, for saying that. From 1998 to 1992 and 2017 to 2012. That's where we got the data from.
So we're not using we're not using a dual meet scenario to explain this. So we're taking the pressure of the duel out of the situation. You're just putting the pressure on the athlete to win the match. We're taking all the outside factors out, win or lose the match. Obviously, with the tournament, you need to win to move on. So there's that incentive to win versus, all right, we're going to clam up and try to not get pinned to win the duel. So we're taking all that extra duel potential, confounding factors out of it. We're
Correct.
just looking at the schools. Got it.
Yeah,
and you're also getting the best of the best because it's only the top 33 there. That leaves, at least half the wrestlers at home.
Correct. And just to review for people who aren't real familiar with stats, correlations run from +1 to -1. +1 means they're going the same direction. Negative means they're inverse. Okay. On slide 13, you see a cumulative percentage there from the amount of wins, where it starts out at 0.92, and then you see it accumulating. In order to see this better, I went to slide 14 that shows you a bar graph of the cumulative percentages, and I did a couple that you can look at home. Slide 15 might be the best one to look at, where you can see a couple way to the right. That thing sticking way up at the right is a pin. Okay, that's how frequent a pin is. Then you see two other places where it sticks up above and continually going down, which is both 8 and 15. And that's a lot because there's extra points. Now, granted, in the tournament, not many teams are in the hunt for the title or anything like that, but it's still in people's minds. So it's interesting. I'm glad Jason brought this up, but it still reflects there is something to do with these extra points. Slide 16 is just a dot graph of the same thing. Tomato, tomato. Some people look at things differently. Slide 17 is an interesting one. This is in a ranked order of what margin of victory happens the most. I sent out, Kevin was on the text, I sent out a group text to the William & Mary guys. Hats off for Dr. Bobby Powell figuring out that pin is 4th. Nobody else even came close to that. It's a wild thing that a pin happens more than anything other than 2, 1, and 3. Now, that doesn't mean it happens then more than all of them combined, but you're more likely to see a pin than you are a 4-point decision. That's really staggering to many people.
That was counterintuitive for me
Yep. And you can see here where 8 jumps over 7 and 15 jumps over a bunch, and 9 does jump over 7 also, and a lot of things jump over 14. And a lot of that is because takedowns were 2 points. If I'm winning by 7, I get a takedown to get extra points or 14. So the next slide is a bar graph of the ranked order, which is easy to see. And you can see where pin and 8 and 15 jump over things. Okay, now, the 8 and 15 points jumping over thing is an interesting thing. I really think if this were to be every single point counts, okay, we wouldn't just be waiting for an 8 or 15 point win. We'd be trying to score more often than in the regular system. There would be no more quote unquote kneeling on the football. Okay. This is potentially a good sign for margin of victory because, like I said earlier, the scoring went down 15% from 88 to 92 from 2017 to 2022. Slide 20, we can see the decreases from 88-92 to 17 to 22. The biggest decrease was 0, and I'll let Kevin and Jason talk about this, how we changed the overtime rules to change this with the sudden death now and takedowns.
Yeah, because we had the tiebreaker, which everybody just called a coin flip for a long time. Once we got past the 1 minute sudden victory, and then it was the coin flip, which they changed to. I want to say I was in college when they did this. They added the riding time, cumulative riding time, up to TB2, and then last season's when they changed it to now it's after the first set of tiebreakers, cumulative riding time. Is a factor to determine it. And again, as I said earlier, they don't put the extra point on the board if it's a riding time victory. Now, some cases you're seeing the starting positions also. If in fact, all right, I'm gonna give up 1 to try to score 2 here because I've got a stall call against, or I've got 2 stall calls against. So there's that match management that also comes into play, and all of that is a factor when we get to sudden victory.
Yes, and also because of the
interestingly on ties. Again, in the 20s, there were no ties. It got to the end, and the guy if there was no minute of riding time, the referee made the decision. And then in the early 40s, that was the first time they had points. Before that, it was you pinned or the referee made the decision. Then they added points. And then, but in overtime, then, if it got down to the end and nobody had won, it used to call it a referee's decision.
And in dual meets, there was no overtime until I'm not sure. Yeah, because you'd go through these old results, and matter of fact, I stumbled across a result from Central Missouri dual meet from 1963. Ron Murakatani, our brother in arms with the NWCA longtime coach at Merrimack and with the state of Missouri, wrestled a draw, and I sent it to his son David. He's like, what's DR mean? I was like, that's a draw. There were ties back then in dual meets, and sometimes you'll see that. Hasselrig famously has a tie on his record, and we'd see matches that ended in ties, but that was only in dual meets. Tournaments, you got to advance.
Yeah, and also with the new rule,
49, they put the referee back in, and they decided. So I can't remember when it was. Sometime in the 50s, go, nah, we're gonna let the wrestlers decide it. And then you start to see criteria.
Yeah, one last thing I want to say with the overtime. Now, on the original with the takedown, that's sudden death. That ends the match, which that didn't used to in the past. So that's a reason that there's less ties now also.
Yeah, true. Okay. You'd see matches that would go 5-5. You'd see like 5-5, 7-6. Because they're wrestling an extra timed overtime period as well. So yes, there's your one and there's mostly your 2 point outcomes.
And what we found in the past 10 tournaments is almost 1% of matches ended up with a tie score, which is wild. Slide 21, guys. We don't need to go too deep into this, but what this shows is it doesn't really matter the weight class with the margin of victory, except for the heavyweights with a little bit more pins. This is reflected in change of percentage, not a percentage change. I probably should have taken the percentage thing out of there, but I didn't want to confuse people. So I did a lot of analysis on this, and it's basically a chi-square goodness of fit that everything, it doesn't matter the weight class on the margin of victory. Okay, what does MatStats recommend? Slide 22. Okay, it's a modified margin of victory scoring system. All individual bouts will be using the same scoring system. The team points were changed for the dual meet, not the individual points in the match. The team will score points based on the margin of victory of each bout with 3 modifications. Okay. The 3 modifications will be, number 1, in a tie match where somebody wins, that winning team gets 1 point, same as they won by 1. The team's got to get something for having a hand raised. We're going to cap all technical falls at 15 points, and the pin will be 20 points. Okay, forfeit and defaults also.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why these modifications? Slide 24, okay, says the winner of a match needs to have something, and it's best to cap the tech falls. And we can go over to slide 25, where that shows the decrease in the tie matches. Okay, so it won't be as big of a factor, but they are there. It was almost 1% for the 10 years. It's down to almost 0.75% now. Okay. Slide 26, okay, shows us that all technical falls, there's 3.8% of all matches are techs, almost 10% are pins, 9.86%. Okay. There are 2.5 times as many pins as there are techs. All right. Currently, the tech fall is worth 5. Next slide, 27, Jason. And the pin is worth 6. That is a 20% bonus for the team. If we score the tech all the way to 21 and the pin is 22 points, that would only be a 4.7% bonus. If we make all techs 15 points and pins worth 20, we would be holding up a system. We would not be holding up the system for 1.34% of bouts. That's bouts that are 16 points and more, not just regular technicals, not just 15, but 16 or more. So, but I believe Jason brought it up in the beginning. Why get caught up in such a small number of stuff? Okay. Also, it will be easy for fans to remember a tech is 15, a pin is 20.
Yeah, and
Everybody
we're not getting
knows,
sorry to interrupt in terms of that. So that's where the 22 comes in. You're like, 22. It just it might have a firm supporting point of why 22, but it's 22. What, I mean, granted, touchdowns are randomly 6 and an extra point is 7 and a 2-point, granted, all sports have an arbitrary factor given to them for why a point is scored the way it is or why it is put up on the board the way it is. But 22, come on, let's get the 22. No, come on, so I like rolling it to 20. I also like rolling the tech to 15. You're going to have the outliers, as we said, the 16 to 17s, especially if they go with the riding time. You're up 14, you get the takedown at the buzzer to get to 16, and there's the extra point. Okay, well, you get to 15. I like it. It actually is a little bit of a variant from what I had, because I had the fall at I think I had the fall at 25 initially on what I was going to do, but I like 15 and 20 moving forward.
I tell you what, I'd be curious, I did find those articles by Wade, and he makes the point, if a tech fall is 5, then a pin should be 10, and I'd be curious to see what he felt about it. He'd probably want the pin to be 30. And I didn't run it with 30. I ran some.
Says one of 2 guys that has 100 college career pins.
Well,
okay,
true.
So of course he does. He wants to be the only guy to win a dual meet by himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we'd love that, right? He would totally. I won that whole dual meet by myself. Right? There is an I in team.
If they let him wrestle 4 matches, he could do it.
Yeah, exactly. So the next slide here, slide 28. Kevin and I discussed this for a while. This is a Kevin Hazard idea. Under the current system, what are the total meaning average points for a dual meet? Okay, based on the statistics we did. The average points per bout is 3.59. So multiply that by 10, you have 35.9. Now that's both teams added up together in the
because
current system.
the minimum without team
What-
point deductions is 30. The maximum is 60.
Correct. So what would it be with the MatStats margin of victory thing? Each match would be worth 6.68 points, and the total would be 66.8. So we would be close to doubling the team scoring under the current system. Just so everybody has in mind, I know some people think with the margin of victory, it'd be way more with the 20-point pin. That wouldn't be the case. Okay. Now, all right, we are going to do something new here, guys. We're going to spice up this show a little bit. I was at the
Great.
convention and people said they wanted some fun stuff here.
Well, I did a trivia
what
show
we're
for the
doing-
convention the last 2 years when we were remote. So, wonder if you're
Yeah,
going to be
we're
using
gonna
any of the
play a
questions
little-
I threw out. Let's see what we got. Bring it on.
We're going to
Do we
play a
have a
little
buzzer?
Iowa, Oklahoma,
We need the
or
buzz in,
Pennsylvania.
Do we
Okay.
have a-
Clearly, these are the three biggest states for college wrestling for teams that win national titles: Iowa, Oklahoma, and Pennsylvania. I'm going to ask you three wrestlers. Two happen to be men, one happens to be women. They're all
Okay.
All-Americans. And you got to guess what state they're from: Iowa,
right.
Oklahoma, or Pennsylvania.
Do we both
Okay.
blurt it out,
Yep.
or you've got them, or whatever? So
No,
Good
I have them
reason.
here. I didn't put them there so nobody could look them up.
I was going to say,
Okay.
how do we determine who does this? Do we raise our hand? I mean, we got to have some ground rules
No,
here.
I'm
'cause
going to let
those
I'm gonna let
hazards are
Kevin-
cheating people.
in a heartbeat.
Kevin's going to get.
Brian's a biter. I know he got it from his dad.
Okay, Kevin's going to go first on the first one, then Brian on the first on the second one, then Kevin first on the third one, and we'll switch it around next month.
Age.
Okay,
They give me the
guys.
age advantage.
Tony Davis, and it's what college he wrestled for, what state it's in: Iowa, Oklahoma, or Pennsylvania. Tony Davis.
I have no idea.
Do I get a chance to steal if he doesn't
Yeah.
get it?
Yes.
Go ahead, Jason. Go ahead.
Illinois native wrestled at Northern Iowa.
Bingo, national champion, 2000. Okay,
I-
now
When I saw
Brian, you
this,
go
I
first
said
on
to
this
Gorms,
one.
I said, I don't have a chance.
Do I get a bonus that he
It's
wrestled at
Nick
Lassen in
Lopez,
junior college?
The trivia champion of wrestling.
yeah,
Now,
you
here's
get
the
a
thing.
bonus there for knowing.
I may not know all the answers off the top of my head, but I know where to get them pretty quickly. So this is why I'm usually the phone a friend when somebody's at a bar or a tournament and somebody's trying to say they did something one year that they didn't. I get that call probably twice a month. And sometimes I actually get it, believe it or not, I get that type of call from athletic directors and sports administrators trying to fact check resumes for job applications. Or embellishing. So I'm the guy that had no career to speak of, but I will make sure nobody's lying about their career either. So, yeah.
Okay.
So whether I may not know it up
I'm gonna
here,
let you-
but I probably entered it. So anyway, let's move on.
I'm going to let you go first on this one.
All
Joe
right.
Flaggart.
Joel Flaggart, Oklahoma.
Wow, did you know that, Kevin?
I'm not going to get any of these. You're
Okay,
there's-
he came in fourth in 2005.
Yeah,
at
from
197.
Oklahoma, wrestled at Oklahoma.
Kevin, you're going first now. Mia
Okay.
Macaluso. She's a woman.
Say it again.
Mia Macaluso.
No idea.
Well, you have three states to guess from. You might as well guess one of them.
Okay, I'm going to say Pennsylvania.
Jason, what do you
She's a New York native that wrestles at East Stroudsburg in Pennsylvania. So he gets credit for
Yeah.
that.
Yep. Jason Bryan is the man on this.
Well, also
Okay,
again,
so that's
I
all good.
read
Her sister
read
did
her
the award
sister's
this year.
bio for the Hall of Fame for the Tricia Saunders Award this year. Her sister Sophia won the Tricia Saunders High School Excellence Award this year, and I met their mom at the Hall of Fame Honors Weekend, and met the dad in Fargo and saw the mom again. Great people. Macalusos are great people. So.
Yeah, there was a reason I picked her. Okay. And also, there's not as many All-Americans from Oklahoma or Iowa in women's. Okay. Now, let's get back to the show here. MatStats' biggest concern is that the pin far outweighs many tightly contested victories. Okay, this is where we need to come in with stats. In the current system, a pin is worth twice, 6 versus 3. In the margin of victory scoring, a pin could be worth 20 times. Once again, Wade Shallows would want the pin to be worth 100 points, right? So there's a huge cause of concern for many on this. A pin could even be worth 2 10-point victories. Okay. And, guys, sometimes in a football game, you see the defensive back getting beat like a dog deep and, it seems to ruin the whole game and stuff like that. Okay. Sometimes small things can outweigh the others. Okay. So let's go into the statistical dive here. Okay. Slide 32. Okay. Can 1 be greater than 9? And what I mean by that is, can one person score more than 9? Okay. We have learned earlier on slide 12-29 that the average dual meet points used to score in each match are 6.68 with the new system when the margin of victory is used. If we control for pins and defaults, it's 4.4 points. So a 20-point pin would be worth 20 divided by 4.4 is 4.54. So it's worth 4.54 individual matches, as opposed to right now it's worth 2, 6 divided by 3. So it's really only 2.07 times more valuable in the grand scheme of things than a pin is currently. Okay?
So there's not that much of a difference, even though like the point values are up. But then again, that also means the math doesn't change. The numbers might be there, but the math actually doesn't change.
Correct, Jason. So when you go to the next slide, slide 33, here's where it gets into pretty big stats here. We know the 4 most common margin of victories are 2-1-3 pin. Okay. Under the proper conditions, if one team has 9 matches with a margin of victory between 0 and 3 points, that could add up to less than 20. Okay. The probability of one team in a dual meet having a pin and the other having 9 victories of 0 to 3 points is 1 in 29,912 dual meets. Okay? So we don't need to sit up and worry about these things. If we say, what about 9 victories by 0 to 2 points in a pin? That will happen 1 every 417,000 dual meets. Now, how long does it take for these numbers to happen? We have 348 teams right now in college wrestling, men's teams. They have about 15 dual meets a year. You divide that by 2 because 2 teams need to wrestle each other. In the 0 to 3 point system with the 29,000 dual meets, it'll take us 11 and a half years for that to happen. In the 0 and 2 scenario, 417,000 and change matches, it'll take 159 years to happen. These odds are so long, we should not hold back a potential good move for the sport for this. But with saying that, hold on, let me say this first. I did in my grad thesis in the 80s, run the numbers for Joe DiMaggio. In 4,000 years, he never got a 56-game hitting streak or anything close to it. But he sure as hell did do that in 1941. So go ahead, Jason. Let's hear what your questions are.
So the first thing people think of is what's wrong with the rule? What is wrong? Why? And we've done a good job of breaking this down. Now, when looking at it, you also look at this is existing data. Now let's go back to what I said earlier. Let's put the dual meet element back into the equation with these numbers. Does everybody gonna wrestle the same way, knowing that there are points on the line? Okay, we're down. Say that pin happens at 125. We start at 125. You're 20 points in the hole. Every single wrestler wrestles different from there on out. This is why it's hard to actually apply this logic to past results. Now, we've done this in a couple of situations where, again, the fan brought up, we talked before the show, how, say, 3 outcomes beat 7. That actually, there was a situation with a version of my scenario, which I think I had as 25, where there was 3 falls and it outweighed the total, and I was using a total points, not a margin of victory, very similar. but it was like, okay, well, those other 7 decisions didn't score. The difference was not 25 points, I don't think, or something like that. It was like 7 really 1 and 2 point decisions. Very rare, but that was 7. It wasn't 9. But to apply that logic to something that happened previously, again, it's kind of hard to do. It's like, well, we know we're down. It's a dual meet. The outcome of the match doesn't change. The winner is still trying to win the match. So that's where I'm looking at going. It's such an outlier, and especially the mindset changes. And again, the dual meet isn't for a national championship. So before we even get to the finality of why do this, why not do this? So
yeah,
that's my little piece here. Kevin, what do you got?
A little thing. I went back and applied the new rules to 3 iconic matches. I did Penn State, Iowa 2022, Ohio State, Penn State
we'll get to that,
2018. Kevin. Oh, you got that slide?
Yeah, we got that. We'll
get to that eventually,
okay,
Kevin.
We'll come to that then.
All right.
So,
but again, to Glenn, to the point is like right now we have a system where 4 can beat 6, and it happens every year.
Yeah,
correct.
I don't see, again, we have a situation where you brought up football with the DB getting beat. I guess that might hit close to the home with some of your Tennessee losses over the years. Maybe you spelled dog like Georgia too. I thought that was interesting. But we look at it, it's like, again, if you want to apply.
That was a reference to the Bama Georgia title game a few years ago.
Let's look at team scoring, like team scenario. This is, again, we're looking at it from a team aspect. And if you could, let's look at team points. Well, we've got somebody that dropped 72. Kevin Bradshaw was a basketball player who set the NCAA Division I record for most points in a single basketball game back when Paul Westhead coached at Loyola Marymount. He played for U.S. International, which I don't even think is a school anymore, out in San Diego. He scored 72 points in a single game by himself. I think they might have had 150 total. So he had 72. The rest of the team had 80, and that was the run and shoot offense, or the run and gun offense. So, the wrestling limits our stars from scoring. So this is a case where while it's not 100%, unlimited points on which your heroes can score, other team sports are like this. You can have a guy hit 3 home runs, Fernando Tatis hit 2 grand slams in an inning. That's 8 runs batted in. You don't limit him to just 3. So to apply other team scoring logic and to over adjudicate or over-administrate the outlier, I don't think that's the way to facilitate growth. But
exactly. So the next slide, can 2 be greater than 8? Yes, it can be. Okay. It's the same basic scenario we did with the 1 and 9. 8 wins times 4.4, which would be if the team that wins 8 doesn't have any pins, would be 35.2. And the 2 pins, of course, would be 40 points. So it can happen. However, if you take the average score for winning 8 bouts, 8 times 6.68, it's 53.4, which is clearly greater than 40. And what Jason and Kevin both were saying loud and clear, it changes the way people will wrestle if you're losing by a certain thing. It's not a static game. It's like the whole Lafleur curve we talked about on one show, and taxes are not static and all that stuff. So the people would be going into the game differently. If you're losing by 3, you got to shoot a 3-point shot on the buzzer, right? You're not going to try to get the layup. Okay. There's other NCAA sports that are chock full of examples of 1 to 3 athletes being so far above the mean that they change all of March Madness. Steph Curry brought Davidson, a long way because he was just something really special at a small, mediocre school. You can win a track championship, national championship, with 3 really good sprinters, and you don't need the whole team. So the 3 pins thing that Jason referred to, okay, under the current scenario, of course, 3 times is 18 and 7 times 3 is 21. So you can't win a match with 3 pins. It will happen, okay? It's not like the crazy thing where I said with the 1 pin is never going to happen.
But Glenn, I want to, before we get too deep, I want to also point out what is some of, and I will say this from reading amateur wrestling news and reading Milkovich and listening to reading Wade's blogs and then hearing basically, I don't want to say it's not my generation, but I'd say it's people of y'all's era that were so used to wrestling. You're supposed to go for the pin. I see this a lot on Facebook comments too. How do we get them to go for the pin? Well, This is how you get them to go for the pin. You've gotten decked twice. You've got 8 more matches to go for the fall. There's your incentive to pin. Don't just say, well, we got pinned twice, we can't win the match. No, you get 1 pin. You've cut it in half if you shut it down. So to me, this is your impetus on where do you want? You want the incentive to go for the fall? Here it is, because if you give up a fall, you got to match it. There's your 9 other guys that need to get that fall versus like, I'm going to go out and get a 7-3 cruise here. Well, you can tech this kid. Get that 15 points. Get the fall. If you can tech a guy, you can probably pin the guy. So let's look at it from that way. If you want more falls, this is a way to also facilitate it, in my humble opinion.
Thank you, Jason. I was thinking the same thing.
Agree.
And to go with the most common 7 and 3 numbers, of course, you think football. If one team scores 3 touchdowns and gets extra points, they have 21. The other team scores 7 field goals, they get 21. They go overtime. No one's complaining in that sport that one team scored 3 times and the other team scored 7 times and they're going overtime, right?
Yeah, the only guys that complain are the guys that don't have that kicker that kicked the 7 field goals on their fantasy football team.
Exactly. Okay, so slide 37, Kevin Hazard, you're up.
Okay, I went back and just I plugged in a couple of big matches, and then the first one was Penn State, Iowa last year. And this was the most interesting one because, doing the analysis after the fact, it was 1913. And with the old rules, and it was only 23-18 with the new. And so that kind of contradicted the fact that there should be more scoring, except if you go back and look at the lineup, there were so many number 1s against number 2s, you had a lot of 1 and 2 point matches. So it ended up very much the same. But, so we get a 9-0 in the first round at 125. And then you get to 67 or 65, Iowa returns the favor. So that brings it back. So that was interesting. You go to the other 2, and Ohio State, Penn State, and the big match there, it was at the end of 49 in the old scoring. Ohio State's up 10-5. Penn State's up 15-11 because they get a fall. So, but then the final score, very much the same. Not quite as close, but it didn't change the winner, but it made it more interesting. They were more back and forth because of the changes. And then back to Oklahoma State, Iowa in 1998, same kind of thing, that there were a lot of NCAA champs in that match, but there was still a whole lot of scoring. And it got down to Okie State was kind of cruising, and then Pat Papalizio gets defaulted out for stalling in the second period. Guess where they were wrestling? And all of a sudden it goes from 48-23 to 48-43. Now it's a match again. And like Jason said earlier, get the fall, get the pin. You can come back. You're down 25 points. It's not a big deal. Go get the fall or get the default.
Now, Glenn, I want to point out something that may not have been clear from the onset. Now that we've actually got some visuals here for those watching on the video, and if you're following along on the podcast with the slideshow with it, Glenn has brought this up as margin of victory. So this is it's similar in concept to points scored per earned, but you're going with the differential versus the total points. This is not I've scored 15, you've scored 6, the team scores 15-6. It's similar in terms of the margin of victory is what this is going to be the same as if you did that, but you're just putting a different spin on the margin of victory. So hence our scores may be more 23-18. Now, what I do like about the margin of victory is you get rid of the potential of a very an administrative eye-opener, so to speak. If you get a team and you get run out of the gym and get shut out, well, yeah, nothing's good's gonna happen about a shutout. 55-0's gonna look ugly no matter what you do it. But 55-0's a little bit more easier to stomach than 240-0 or 240-12. So this mitigates that to a point.
Correct.
Although we probably have to run some numbers on blowouts. That may not be worth a full effort. Maybe something we do on our own. Is the blowout quotient also? We get a higher score, something that's more indicative of how our points are scored in our individual matches. But it also sticks with our traditionalists. I feel like this is a melding of the point scored, point earned versus our traditional system. So you've kind of got me really, my gears moving on this one here. So again, we didn't outline that this wasn't a point scored, point earned here in the beginning. So I wanted to clear that up before we got too far to the end of the show.
Well, thank you. Okay, and thank you for doing that. Those 3 recent dual meets, Kevin. I'm glad you brought that up, Jason. Okay, now if we go to the next slide, I really think margin of victory scoring opens up the door for more parity. Okay, we've mentioned Wade Shallow so many times in the show, we might as well mention him again. Clarion State in the 70s was really, one of the best teams in the country due to a few guys they had, one being Wade. Edinburgh in 2015 is a great example of this. They came in third in the NCAAs. This is 2 tiny PSAC schools really making a splash. For anybody who was happy to see Kentucky get beat by St. Peter's in March Madness last year, I was at the tournament when we saw that. I was at the wrestling tournament, of course, when that happened. That gets a lot of national attention to get some small teams in there. The big schools, of course, the Big Ten guys, Okie State, other big schools, NC State, Tech, I don't want to leave anybody out, really have a chance of building a solid lineup 2 and 3 deep that the Edinburghs and the Clarions didn't have a chance to do. But in this scenario, we could have, the Clarion factor where 3 of their guys could probably win just about any dual meet. Okay. 1, 2, or 3 people can make a difference. My big example of 1, 2, or 3, one person making a difference, I know Jason will love this one. The New York media is still mad at Peyton Manning for staying in college instead of going to the New York Jets in 1997. Okay.
Would you want to get drafted by the Jets? Nobody wants to get drafted by the Jets.
Jets, exactly. They've been wandering the wilderness ever since the Jets. Ever since Joe Namath, they've been wandering the wilderness. But this could be something because, let's face it, guys, we have a situation in Division I where a lot of the big athletic schools do not have wrestling and will not have wrestling. But we were happy when these smaller Division I teams add. So this could really help the parity thing out. That is subjective. We don't know until we see more. Now, like most rule changes, this should be done on a voluntary and small level exhibition level. I actually think the best place to start this is the NWCA All-Star Match. I was helping out Dr. McLaughlin and Joe Savarese in the 2017 All-Star Match at Princeton. I was the one who brought women and did other things for them. Now, I suggested we have a dual meet with that. I suggested combining the men and women together, because that was when women were first coming about. We are having an all-star match again, from what all indications is, sometime this fall in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, breaking news, okay? in case you're listening.
Okay. All right. So if we are having that all-star match, okay.
Curveballs there, Glenn. Sorry, continue. Yeah.
In theory, if we have another all-star match, let's try it with that because it's not really a team event. No one's going to get upset if red wins or green wins. Do you combine both teams and have 20 people on a team? Women are different scoring. So probably for this, you just use the 10 men versus 10 men. You divide it up, because clearly women's scoring is different. They're freestyle. Okay. These experimental rules, like for example, in 2015, which is not breaking news, when Rob Larimore sponsored in Atlanta, takedowns were worth 3. Okay. So we tried that there. It didn't stick, but what's wrong with trying this? Okay. I don't see Penn State and Iowa opting to try this in their dual meet. So another way to do it would be get 2 smaller schools. I don't care if they're Division III, NAIA, what they are, JUCOs. Let's just have them try it. Okay. I don't know if anybody knows the history of Thanksgiving Day football, but the reason the Cowboys play football every Thanksgiving They
Because
were
they
a
need to
new
put everybody to
team.
sleep. That's what it is. It's not the turkey. It's
Yep.
not the tryptophan. It's putting everybody to sleep. That's why.
Well, actually, the reason was the Cowboys wanted to get on TV because nobody knew about them. They were a smaller city then, and now obviously it's changed now. The Cowboys, everybody knows about. But we could get some coaches to do this and get a lot of notoriety. Put it on the internet, put it on TV maybe. I think you could make the news.
Yeah, it also could be a situation where, again, let's go back to 1963 with what I was looking up in amateur wrestling news about the fall times and that 1-1-1, that 101, the takedown, escape, reversal rule. They were going to do it in the Big Eight. They were going to do that rule in only Big Eight dual meets before it got rolled back. So there could also be a situation where, the individual outcomes are, they're there. They're not going to change. The scoring of the match, of the individual match, does not change. It should not impact, there is, again, the outlier. Well, I'm going for the pin, and I was winning. Well, that happens in regular, that happens all the time in wrestling anyway. Your guy winning gets pinned. It's not because, I'm trying to win the duel for the team. Well, that happens in the sport. It's part of the sport. Any given moment, somebody can get decked. So, or even instead of a dual meet, I think, I like the All-Star for proving grounds, but I think there needs to be a vested interest in the actual outcome versus, a fantasy team, for lack of a better term. So what's to stop, say, I do like your non-Division I conference. Let's pick a conference in Division III or Division II that has a pretty good little dual meet schedule with good crowds. That would be a great pilot program. It doesn't change the individual outcomes because those matches are still counting. So give us some real data. So I say give a conference a shot. Yeah, well, the NCAA did try, and Jim Junt has talked about this. They did try their optional scoring, but the problem is there's, it was an option. They call it an optional scoring, and they did it was more of the point accrual type of thing versus the margin of victory. So, but I think with it out, as a governing body, but not as a one that people's eyes are on, and people are going to see a Liberty Apprentice School dual meet, they're not going to dive into it. But if Wartburg and Augsburg do this at the Battle of the Bergs, one of the biggest rivalries in all of college sports, regardless of sports, and one of the top 4 or 5 biggest rivalries in the sport of wrestling. Now you got people talking there. That's what Glenn's pointing at the PR. So give it a dual meet that's got some oomph. Give it maybe a conference schedule that's maybe not, not the New England where you've got 20 some schools, but maybe a 16 conference that has that's not in Division III. They don't have a conference championship a lot of places to determine their qualifier. I mean, they have conferences, but they're all regional based. So say the Wisconsin conference does this, or maybe even it's just schools within a conference that has the teams that have the sport but don't actually sponsor it. Say Augsburg, St. John's, Concordia, and the MIAC, which doesn't sponsor wrestling as a conference. These are all great, viable testing grounds, Glenn. So, the All-Stars won, and there's a couple others I think that would be great too.
Yeah, I love your suggestions there, because I think we need to experiment with it somewhere. And like I said, Iowa, Penn State's not the place to start, but our favorite conference, the American Rivers Conference, where you have to have wrestling. The best conference in America. Okay, now the next thing for MatStats to do is to look into tournament team scoring. Okay. It is a difficult thing to understand tournament scoring. MatStats has a group, and Kevin's part of our group. Of course, we listen to Jason Brian Hazard every year at the Nationals. We've been going out there since '86 or before. Every year we go out there, somebody in the suite asks me, now, how do you score points at a tournament? These guys have been going to tournaments for 40 years, and they don't understand it. Okay, the casual fan at home is not going to understand it. The best chance we ever had was when Bo Nickel pinned Miles Martin in the finals. If we would have had that been the last match, then on TV, they won. Whoever wins this match, that team wins the national title. Okay, but the chance of that ever happening again, and we didn't put that last. So anyway, we could have things that people understand the scoring better. One thing that's happening at Nationals that we learned in last month's episode, the default ratio in the last round of consolations, the placing rounds and all, are 3.35 times as high as normal rounds. The reason this is happening is twofold. They're at the end of a long weekend, 5, 6, 7, 8 matches. Okay, number one. Number two, there's so little to gain. Sometimes there's only 1 point to gain on the team scoring. Okay, between 7th and 8th place, or very little. That there's really not much reason for those kids to go out there. So the fans and the people of real loyal fans that come to session 5, of course, they're seeing a lot of defaults. This could be one way to ease that burden. You might be wrestling to get your team in the top 10 because now I can only get 1 point or, 3 if I pin. This way you could get a lot more points. So I think it's interesting to look into statistically the tournaments next. Now, what we've always said is we want feedback. This is a topic that I think we can get a lot of feedback. Hit us up on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at NWCA MatStats. We also have a MatStats email account, nwcamatsstats@gmail.com. Hit us up. We'd like to hear what you guys want to hear next or anything about this. What's our next show on, guys? I just talked about it. The next MatStats episode, Wednesday, September 21st, 2022, it will be dealing with tournament team scoring and what we might have to offer for that. Guys, I'd like to hear anything for you guys before we wrap things up.
Well, that's pretty much what I got here in terms of, let's go back to over here. Let's have that fun. Let's, back to live mode. Hold on. Let's got to do this. 1 second. There we go. Now we got it. As far as all that goes, I mean, it's one of those things that I love this topic. I love the dual meet topic. I think we do need dual meet scoring changes. And this was actually going to be part 2 of my wrestling renovation. We went over part 1 back on MatStats 10. And of course, it didn't take very long. I'm going to go back to MatStats 10 for a second, where I did the renovation of Division I wrestling with realignment. Didn't take long for one mid-major. Like I said, one mid-major would screw it all up, and it did. So Campbell is leaving the Big South Conference for all sports, and they're going to move to the Colonial. So what that does is that takes the 6 teams that I had in the Ohio Valley Big South scheduling agreement, like they have for football, and they move that to the CAA. Well, that's possibly that would, okay, let's shift some teams around that can still move things around in terms of that 6-team quadrant, but it would move Campbell over to the CAA. Now, that brings 3 schools with wrestling in the CAA. Hofstra, Drexel, and now Campbell would be 3 all sports members with wrestling. So that could open the door for that affiliate situation with the CAA again. And I remember I batched them with the Northeast Conference. Morgan State, which we don't know where they're going to end. And matter of fact, they announced on Monday, Kenny Monday, go figure, is going to be their new head wrestling coach. So we don't know where Morgan's going to land. I think geographically it's a good fit there or in the Southern Conference. We'll get to that bridge when we come to it. But at the same point, the MatStats stuff, it's been fun. I'm curious on what you're going to come up with on the tournament scoring because, again, to your point, you go and I have a primer in the Mat Talk preview guide every year, how to score points per round, and you've got people that have been going to the tournament for 50 years that can't score this thing, or they're, it's been computerized since GIMP started computerizing it in the early 70s. So who knows exactly, it's one of these, okay, well, we know it's half point. Now I understand at the convention there was a discussion to half consolation points in terms of the bonus victories in the consolation side because, a first round consolation 1 fall versus a semifinal fall is the same thing without the exception of the advancement. So I'm just curious what you're going to come up with the tournament points. So that has got me really interested for next show.
The thing I liked about this show is, and when we first started talking about it, I think that really stuck out for me was it makes it simpler. It makes it, and again, Chalice said it, and it's back to the 50s. People look at the scoring and they kind of scratch their head. Now, I score 7 points, I get 7 points for the team. That I think is in a nutshell what this all does, and it's good, and it would be good for the sport.
That's what I got for
there,
there.
Guys,
Glenn,
great. Thank you thank you very much. And I'll just wrap things up for MatStats. For my fellow hosts, Jason Bryant and Kevin Hazard. I'm glad you guys are listening, and we see you next month talking about tournament scoring.